Ross Atkins spoke to members of the Toronto Blue Jay media about the biggest questions going on this offseason.
You are Locked On Blue Jays, your daily Toronto Blue Jays podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jays. Thank you for making Locked On Blue Jays your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. As always, I'm Braden Iwasco. He's Carter First. You can find us on Twitter, Braden5Iwasco, Carter First 2 as well on Instagram and TikTok at Locked On Blue Jays as well. If you're new here to YouTube or you're listening anywhere else, make sure you head over to the YouTube page. We've sort of made it the hub. You can get videos, live streams, shorts, and of course the podcast. We also have a Discord link down in the description, so you guys can go join that and talk Blue Jays with us whenever you want. Today's is a big episode. We got, well, I don't want to call them answers because some of them, I mean, it is answers, but it's not. From Ross Atkins, once again, talking to the members of the Toronto chapter of BBWAA. This was on Tuesday about the biggest questions surrounding this club's offseason ahead of next week's winter meetings. So we'll get into all of that. Carter, I guess starting off, before we get into all the questions and answers here, because some of them are pretty interesting, do you get frustrated as much as I do when Ross Atkins gets asked a question and it's an answer, but it's not an answer? Does that really just like get under your skin as much as it does for me?
I think at this point, it's just expected. Like, a lot of these answers seem very media trained, but at some points, you got to understand, like, he's not going to give you every single insight on Juan Soto. He's not going to be the first one to break the news. I think there might be, again, talks going on with top Boris, management, things like that. And there's obviously advantages and disadvantages there is to making things public. So I think at that point, you have to kind of walk on a grain of salt. But when it comes to, like, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. stuff within the team, I definitely want more clear-cut answers. That has stuff. That's answers that you have more control of, especially when it comes to contracts, guys that have not been signed. There's no other teams right now that can go at Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Bichette unless they want to go in the trade rumors, talks, things like that. And just his offseason plans. I would like more clear-cut answers to that. And we'll kind of dive into it. Some answers he gave were really good, and some answers are just the Ross Atkins special, as we like to call it on this podcast.
Yeah, and there was some really good answers on Jordan Romano, what happened there. Obviously, Juan Soto, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and a whole bunch else to get into. Let's kick things off with his answer to this question. What can you say about the Blue Jays meetings with Juan Soto? And I think we all expect what he's going to say here is not much, but I'll read it to you so you guys know everything what's going on as well. I have so much respect for where Soto is in the process, what he's accomplished in his career, to be at such a pivotal juncture and what this means for him and his family. I also have respect for where Scott Boras is in the process. So I'm not going to comment specifically on the pursuit or lack thereof. The interest is obviously there from all 30 teams. I think that's a pretty understandable answer. I think we've went through this with the Shohei Ohtani stuff. They didn't want a bunch of information coming out prior, anybody doing any leaks. So this is exactly what I expected was going to come out of the Juan Soto question. Is this sort of what you expected as well?
I expected him to kind of word it differently, but you kind of got the same answer, just circulating around a whole lot of nothing, like really breaking down what he said. He said, I have respect for Soto. I have respect for Scott Boras, and I'm not going to comment specifically, but there's obviously interest with 30 teams. Everyone knows that, obviously. Like, why wouldn't you be in on Juan Soto? Whether you are going to be able to pay him that $600, $700 million contract or not, you're going to try to get interest from him. Maybe you can see if you can get like a one-year bargain, anything. Because Juan Soto is going to help your team win. Makes a lot of sense. Like, it reminds me of the exact same thing they did with Shohei Ohtani. They don't want to be too publicized with everything until they get closer to the end of these conversations. So it makes sense. Like, I understand why he's saying these things and why he didn't get into too many specifics. But as a Toronto Blue Jays fan, as a guy that does a podcast, definitely wanted him to allude a little bit more to enlighten us on what's going on with the situation.
Yeah, there's been so much behind closed doors, which is totally understandable. I don't expect there to be that much. But I think as you guys will all see when you're, listening or watching to us talk about this, there are a lot of answers very similar to this where it's nothing. And you get pretty frustrated with that because the Soto one you understand. But then as we continue, when it's easier questions and you're still not getting answers to that, that's a little bit of an issue for me. Carter will continue on. just with a couple more things here. There is a lot to go over here, so maybe we won't dive into every single thing. But some of them are interesting answers that we feel like you guys should hear as well. How do you manage expectations of fans when they're involved in bidding for top tier free agents? I just don't know what the alternative is other than to do our best to make this team better. That's what we focus on, to make this team as good as it possibly can be. We understand that certain pursuits may create a level of excitement, and then that may intensify the level of disappointment. But I don't know a better way to pursue it than to do the best possible job we can to improve the team. Obviously, going back to the Juan Soto stuff here. And I think that is actually an okay answer. It's sort of like, what do you expect me to do? Not say anything or not do anything just so people don't get disappointed? I mean, there's going to be 29 teams that don't get Juan Soto. So I sort of am pretty okay with what he said there. I think that's a pretty open book answer there from Ross Atkins.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the better ones. Like, again, 29 teams. He goes into the disappointment there. 29 teams are going to be disappointed. Realistically, more so 4 teams are going to be disappointed because there's 25 teams that aren't necessarily in the Juan Soto sweepstakes. They kind of understand that they're not going to land this superstar. But the part that I don't love here is that he says he's going to make the team better. Isn't that every team's objective? Yeah. Like, that's, again, sort of the media trained stuff. But again, what else is he supposed to say? Obviously, you want to make your team better. That should be the goal of every single team going into every single offseason. You don't want to set your season up to be a bottom 5 team in the league. So if he would have went out and said, oh yeah, I don't want to make the team better, actually we're going to rebuild and try to build for the future, I don't think a lot of people would have loved that, especially coming off of this last season. He's been always vocal this whole offseason about wanting to be competitive for 2025. And with them being in on all of these free agents, all these top end free agents as well, there's going to be some disappointment. You're obviously not going to land every single top free agent. You're not going to land Juan Soto, Alex Bregman, Santander, Jurickson Profar, all these guys, Teoscar Hernandez that we talked about the other day. Obviously, you're not going to get every single player. So some fans are more in on some players than others. So some fans, at the end of the day, are always going to be disappointed on what you do in a current free agency.
Well, Carter, and if you didn't like that answer, you're really not going to like this one. Do you believe an extension for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. would change the tone of conversations with prospective free agents? He says, I don't know. That's hard to project. I think what I can tell you is that we have a good number of players that like this market. They love this city. They love this country. They've seen the success this group has. Obviously, they're also aware that we're coming off a disappointing year, but I don't think that's been anything that has been an inhibitor. So what's going on with Vladimir Guerrero Jr.? Cue the cricket noises, because he won't say a thing on this, and this is the one that pisses me off. I understand there are decisions that have to be made, but of a guy who came up through the system, face of the franchise, all of this, and you can't even tell us what is going on somewhat with a deal is crazy to me. There are people buying jerseys right now of Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and he might only be around for another season. I think that that's a little bit of a slap in the face, and I will always say this. I understand the backroom stuff. You got to talk about it. But at the end of the day, give us something. Say you're in talks. Say that the conversations are happening. Something. Because I am getting very, very worried about the Vladimir Guerrero Jr. situation.
This kind of reminds me of the generational talent question that he got asked earlier in this offseason. When John Schneider was asked, he was like, yes, Vladdy's a generational player. It's the most obvious thing of all time. Whereas Ross Atkins kind of danced around the question. And it might be because that they are far away in these contract talks. And Ross Atkins doesn't want to go out and say this guy's a generational player. And then 2025 comes around and he gets outbid for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And then he's actively losing that generational player. We've talked about this multiple times. We don't understand why Vladimir Guerrero Jr. hasn't been extended 2 years ago, 3 years ago, honestly. When you have a player like this, a generational player, if Ross Atkins won't say it, I'll say it, generational player Vladimir Guerrero Jr., when you have a guy that has expressed interest in staying with your team long-term, especially being from Canada, he says that players love the country. Again, I don't necessarily disagree with that. I don't agree with that either. Some players are very open to playing in Canada, but some players are like, I'm not going across the border. I just don't want to do that. Don't want to play in the colder climate. So I agree. This is just a whole lot of nothing here. And it builds onto that frustration that you have, because it feels like the Vladimir Guerrero Jr. conversations and the contract extension talks are not going anywhere. And when he leads that question off with saying, I don't know, it's not exactly what you want to hear as a Toronto Blue Jays fan.
Yeah, this really frustrates me, Carter, because, again, players like Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Bo Bichette. They don't come around that often. And when they do, you want them with your team. And especially when they've, said that they're willing to stay here their entire careers, pay the guys. Pay them. You have to. Build around them. That's the play. That's what everybody hopes to do, is to develop good players, keep them in your system forever. That is the end goal of every organization. If they had to pick the one thing that they could do as a manager throughout their careers, would be developing generational players and having them there for 20 years. That would be ideal. But I don't understand this and why they're not pulling the trigger on this. Give them $35 million a year. I guarantee you that would get it done. Give them a 10-year, $35 million a year contract. Maybe 38, whatever. If it's 12 years, give them 35. I don't know. This just seems like I don't understand why the conversations are so far apart on this.
Well, and he says he's seen, like, players have seen what this group can do. Who's the group? It's Vladimir Guerrero Jr., it's Bo Bichette, it's Chris Bassitt, it's Kevin Gausman, Daulton, Varsho, Alejandro, Kirk. These guys are all becoming free agents, either at the end of 2025 or at the end of 2026. Like, there's no window here. If you're looking for free agents to sign, unless you're going on these 1 year, 2 year deals, with honestly it being 1 year deals, because you lose Vladdy, you lose Bo, you lose Chris Bassitt, you lose Erik Swanson. Those are massive blows to your organization. So to say that, we've seen what the group can do, I guess for 2025, that comment makes sense. But if you don't have Vladimir Guerrero Jr. extended, like we've talked about on the podcast, you don't have Bo Bichette, you don't have a lot of these major free agents extended for a longer period of time. There isn't nearly as much incentive for a guy like Juan Soto, a guy like Teoscar Hernandez, a guy like Anthony Santander, Alex Bregman, all these guys we've been talking about this entire offseason to sign long-term contracts with the team, because there's nobody else that are on those exact same long-term contracts, and there's no certainty that they're going to be playing with a competitive team into the later terms of the contract.
And we've talked about the need to extend Vlad and Bo specifically because we look at the farm system, which we just did an episode on whatever that was, Wednesday, and it's not good. So who do you have coming up? What's the next generation? There is none. This is supposed to be the quote-unquote next generation of players, and you're not going to re-sign them, and you're going to go into – it would be a 10-year rebuild, Carter. It would be a 10-year rebuild. And I don't know how that's possible for this organization. Yes, they could go out and sign guys, but right now, this is the best time for the Blue Jays in the past since 2016, 2017, that you've had a really good core. You have the opportunity to move forward and build around them. But instead, you can't get a deal done with a face of a franchise player that is wanting to stay in Canada and play for this team and be, I don't know. I'm just lost for words right now about this whole Vlad situation. And the more and more that this keeps going on, the more and more I think Vlad's going to test free agency at this point, because Ross has spit in his face.
Yeah, it's not good when you can't even really answer on one of the best players, honestly, in the Toronto Blue Jays history. You look at what Vladimir Guerrero Jr. has done before he's even turned 27. Like, I think he's in the later ages of his 25th year, and he's going to turn 26 for the upcoming season. This guy is not old whatsoever. He's not even gone into his prime yet. So it's going to be a horrible situation. Again, I'm not trying to manifest this too much. I don't want this to happen, but it is not going to be fun waking up every morning and not seeing Vladimir Guerrero Jr. with the Toronto Blue Jays that they can't get a contract extension done.
Yeah, you know what? We got a ton more to get into because he commented on a lot of things and a lot of things that we want to talk about, but we do have to take a quick break. So stick with us. Right after this break, we'll come back with some of the more answers Ross Atkins has given us. Today's episode brought to you by Game Time. I always talk about it. The Game Time Picks is a great feature. It makes it even easier to save on sports, comedy, concerts, theater, pretty much anything you can get tickets for, honestly. They have their all-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows you the total upfront with no surprise fees at the checkout. They have their seat views. So you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. I always like to know where I'm sitting. I like to know sort of what the view looks like. I don't know, just brings me to the atmosphere before I actually get to the arena or the ballpark. They have the lowest price guaranteed, or they will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, Carter, some more answers and questions to Ross Atkins. And I think this one relates obviously back to the Shohei Ohtani or the Juan Soto stuff, but they were asked about the Shohei Ohtani situation. Is there anything you learned from Ohtani negotiations that you're taking into this offseason? And Ross says, all positive things. We're a very attractive destination and an incredible city, market, and country that players are excited about, a team that players are excited about. As we become a group of people working together, we get better at talking about that, get better at presenting that, get better at trying to execute to the best of our abilities. Well, that's just I don't know. That's an answer he pulled from the sky because I don't know. That says nothing. What have you learned? What did you learn about the Ohtani negotiations? We're a very good destination. Oh, but Ohtani didn't want to come here.
Yeah, the only thing that I would have liked to see him say is that like they kind of learned to have a backup plan. Like I don't know what he's supposed to say in this scenario. You're kind of setting him up. Like what he's supposed to say, like, oh, we're going to learn that no big free agents want to come to Toronto. Like I don't know what you kind of want from him here. Like the only thing is he didn't really go into the backup plan at all. I think you got to say like, oh, we learned that we were kind of all in on Shohei Ohtani last year. Obviously, we want to land Juan Soto, but we are going to have some other options available if we cannot land Juan Soto. But I think at that point, you'd reestablish that Juan Soto is your top priority, obviously, of the offseason. But this one, I'm more okay with like that media train answer because I don't really understand like what fans would want from him here. He's not like he's going to say, oh, yeah, we learned from heartbreak. We're not going to go on on free agents. You got to be excited for to be in on these top free agents in the offseason.
Yeah, and I think it's the way that he's going about saying this stuff. I feel like could be worded better and he could relay what he's trying to say better because I agree. Some of these questions are pretty meh questions to be honest. And I mean, I don't know. There are a lot of the same questions here that go over a lot of the same stuff. But this was a good one. We sort of talked about what these contract signings, these big contract signings like Ohtani and Soto and all of these guys signing these big deals and what it set a precedent. Well, Carter, the deferral of money is now being the question. Do you believe more players / teams are looking to defer money in contract negotiations, which I actually like? Has the precedent been set for now deferring money? Ross Atkins says, I don't necessarily think there are more players thinking that way. I think it's just more teams, agents, and players being open to different solutions. There's a different priorities for every player. In the case of Shohei, I'm not speaking for him, but he was very public in saying that he was attracted to that because it gave the Dodgers more flexibility, obviously more flexibility to sign guys, what they wanted to do each year became a little bit more flexible. And I think that's actually a very solid answer from him. Out of all the ones I've read, that's a great answer because I think a lot of people now think, well, why doesn't every team just defer money? And I think that's a pretty smart answer from Ross, which I don't necessarily always say. But that one I can totally agree with him in saying that I don't think players are out there looking to defer money. I think it just comes down to the big names want you to still be able to or want to push the fact that they want to be surrounded by other good players. And the deferral of money helps with that. So, yeah, I think that's a really good answer from Ross.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of the same idea as players taking team-friendly contracts that you don't have to pay them these massive lump salaries. And the MLB is a little bit different because they don't have the salary cap, but you don't have to pay them these massive amounts of money. And if you know what your kind of payroll is going to be, obviously those are included in the contract talks. You want to be surrounded with other talent. And that's kind of the whole issue with free agents signing with Toronto right now is that there's an uncertainty of talent within the organization. But I agree. I like this answer. I think with the deferrals, it's always an option. Again, like you said, for the top free agents, like I don't expect like a guy like Hyun-Sung Kim to sign, for example, and defer like $2 million of his $13 million he's going to get in free agency. No, this is more so for the guys that like if the Vladdies are going to sign the Juan Soto's, even I guess you could say the Santanderos, the Bregmans, anyone that's going to get over around, I'd say 20 million a year. I think that's where you can kind of get these deferrals into place. But I guess at the end of the day, if you want to be underneath the luxury tax like the Toronto Blue Jays want to do, deferrals will, I think, be more and more commonplace in these conversations when we're talking about big free agents. But you said that this was one of the questions that Ross Atkins answered pretty effectively. This is the other one that I liked. I didn't necessarily like his answer, but I like how much information he gave us. And it was, what was the decision behind non-tendering Jordan Romano? And then he says, it was a very difficult decision on a personal level, how much he meant to the city, country, team, and what he accomplished. So very difficult for us. From a business standpoint, we have to operate as one. So we remain interested in him and will be heavily pursuing his return and hope that's a potential reality. I have no concerns about his health, which was very surprising. I feel like he will be back physically. We have no medical concerns. We talked about on this podcast when there was a decision to not tender Jordan Romano, and it was like, oh, his arm must be jello right now. It must be an absolute pool noodle. And to come out and say there's no medical concerns, it's interesting because the bullpen, you need bullpen help desperately. Right now, you have Chad Green, you have Erik Swanson, we've gone over it before. Brendan Little, again, is a lower leverage guy I'm okay with as your third bullpen arm right now. Not exactly what you want. If you're going to sign a guy in free agency like Jordan Romano, you see Aroldis Chapman being signed to the Boston Red Sox. That was over $10 million. I get he throws one-on-one still, things like that. He's a little wild. But if it's Aroldis Chapman as your closer, Jordan Romano, maybe this is up for debate for a lot of fans. I'd rather have Jordan Romano at this point. I think he's a lot more consistent. I think he'd be a better closer than Aroldis Chapman. I think if you're going to get a guy that's better than Jordan Romano, you're going to have to go up and pay $10, $11, $12 million for a back-end bullpen arm.
If he's being truthful here to me, Carter, this is the biggest sell of all time. Like, what are you doing? What is the plan? I wonder if he has a clue of what's going on. I could totally get it if he comes out and he said, talks a little bit about, there was health risks, stuff like that, health concerns. We weren't sure if he was going to be able to come back. Okay, fair enough. But to say that it's all good, we're still going to pursue him and try to get him at a discounted price, what's going to happen is you're going to pursue him. That price tag from the 7.5 or 7.75 or whatever it was goes skyrocketing. And now you're going to have to either pay more or you're going to get screwed. And now you're not going to be able to get a closer for what you want. So what, you're relying on Chad Green or Erik Swanson to hopefully have an unbelievable year. And don't get me wrong, I love those two guys, but I don't think either two of them are closers. I think we've seen what we saw from Chad Green, who was actually decent last year in that role, but wasn't super, super consistent. Erik Swanson, more of an eighth guy, an seventh, eighth inning guy. I think you wanted a guy like Jordy that could come in and get the job done. You knew exactly what he was going to throw. We'd sit on the couch and we'd be like, yep, high fastball. Oh, now he's going to the slider, because we knew exactly what he was doing. And if we know that, other teams knew that, and he was still beating guys. That is what is great about closers, and especially Jordan Romano. So this, to me, that was just insane, Carter. I understood the answer. I found it interesting, the answer. I don't love the answer.
Well, it's going to be like, if you can get Jordan Romano in that discounted rate, honestly, anywhere under 7.5, you're going to be happy with it. But it's just, how realistic is that going to be? How much are teams reading into this answer? Do you think teams are taking this at face value when he says that Ross Atkins says, I have no injury concerns? You got to think, when Jordan Romano is talking to any sort of team, the first thing they're going to ask him about is his elbow. How's your elbow feeling? Is it going to be 100%? Things like that. And a lot of these teams do physicals before these contracts are signed anyway. So they're going to have that confirmation that Jordan Romano was signed. I just think it's hard to believe that the market for Jordan Romano is going to go much less than that 7.75 projected arbitration.
Yeah, I don't think so at all. I mean, but we've had this conversation. We've talked about it. We always thought it was, health concerns, obviously. But Carter, you went back and you were talking about the competitive window. They asked, do you expect that you're going to be able to extend that competitive window? We're certainly going to try. Nothing's a slam dunk and nothing is guaranteed. But we certainly feel that it's possible, and it's definitely our goal. I would say probably right now, as it stands, we're better situated offensively from the trade pieces we acquired last year. Jake Bloss is a very intriguing piece for us, but we acquired a good number of position players that have impact on both sides of the ball with upside. So I think that group has more depth, and we see a good number of opportunities in both markets via free agency and trade. That's a weird answer to me about extending the window, because in our minds, the window was 2025, 2026. And to extend that, that first bit of that answer, when he says nothing is, we're certainly going to try, nothing's a slam dunk, nothing is guaranteed. I don't love that. It should be a guarantee. You should have Vlad and Bo locked up for the remainder of time. But instead, you're gambling with your future and this franchise's future. I don't love that one bit.
Yeah, if you're going to try to extend your competitive window, the easiest and best way to do that would be to sign the superstars you already have within your organization. So we're certainly going to try. Yeah, it just leads to the more uncertainty that we keep talking about on this podcast. Doesn't seem like Ross Atkins knows who's going to sign with the Toronto Blue Jays, which isn't necessarily the best feeling when you're doing a podcast, when you're watching the Toronto Blue Jays 162 games, or at least the majority of the games a year. If you're devoting this much time and your general manager is uncertain where you're going to be in the next 2-3 years, along with the rest of the fan base, that's usually not a recipe for success. You go over the prospect pool, you go over the players that they have becoming free agents in 2025, 2026. Not really a lot of players signed for the extended period of time. And when you look, we got up Jake Bloss. That was one of the 5 guys that we talked about pretty much that can be a very good and serviceable player for this team. Again, there's other guys that you hope work out, but when you compare these prospect systems to other prospect systems, you got to be a lot more hopeful if you're the Tampa Bay Rays, the Boston Red Sox, teams like that have a top 10 prospect system compared to the Toronto Blue Jays that for MLB Network are rated at 24.
Yeah. I'm not sold. I'm not sold on anything that was said today. Yes, there was a couple decent enough answers, but not on the questions that any of us want the answers to necessarily. So again, you know what, Carter? We're going to come back. We're going to take a quick break. We'll wrap things up here with the conversation, sort of give our final thoughts on sort of everything that was said, biggest takeaways, etc. We'll be right back. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. I'm telling you guys, I say this every episode because FanDuel is the best place to make your bets, and the live game ones make it even easier because you can see who's doing well, you can see who isn't, and that will dictate some of your bets. And you might as well take advantage of the $150 in bonus bets, but make sure you win that first $5 bet. That's how you get those bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So, Carter, to wrap up, I guess this is sort of final thoughts, feelings. What were your takeaways? For me, the takeaway was that there is a lot of uncertainty right now, and I'm not just talking about the Juan Soto stuff. I feel like, of course, that is 100% going to be uncertain. You're never going to know what is going on in his mind. But for the rest of the franchise here, it seems pretty uncertain, and I think Blue Jays fans looking forward until something gets done should be a little concerned that there might be some tough years in Toronto.
Well, there was probably 9 or 10 questions that were asked. We learned about Jordan Romano, and he gave us some good insight about the deferrals and how that could play into contracts. Other than that, he's just really dancing around a lot of these questions, or he's just been saying the same things that he's been saying since the start of the offseason. We're going to be in on a lot of players. We're going to be in on pitching. We're going to be in on bullpen arms. We're going to be in on Juan Soto. We want to, again, dancing around the want to extend Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Says it's going to be hard, but they have engaged in talks. Not really any certainty or any specifics with the Vladimir Guerrero Jr. contract stuff. So what I'm taking away from this is not really a whole lot. I kind of feel the exact same way as I did before when we're talking about the major issues on this team, whether they're going to address bullpen, whether they're going to sign Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Bichette. The Juan Soto stuff, again, uncertainty is that's just what happens when you're in contract talks. It is uncertain because you don't know what other teams are offering. You don't know where players' heads are at. So in that sense, you got to kind of give it to them. You give them the cop out there because what else are you supposed to say? You're not in other teams' heads. You're not in other players' heads. But overall, just a whole lot of nothing, unfortunately, from Ross Atkins in this press conference.
Yeah, let us know what you guys think about this too, because I mean, me and Carter, we're around this stuff all the time. We're seeing all of these quotes, everything. We're locked in or locked on, if you want to say. There we go. Let us know what you guys think, like about these answers, about some of the stuff that Ross has said. We know that there's a disdain for Ross Atkins, but I think right now we have to just put our trust and faith in him a little bit to get things done. And I know that that's going to be very hard for all of us. I'm right there with you. I'm very worried, like I said. But I guess we just got to have hope and wait and see what happens with Juan Soto. Let the pieces fall where they may. And then if nothing happens, I think I don't know. Maybe we put out a petition. Maybe we riot in the streets. I don't know. To get Ross Atkins the hell away from the Toronto Blue Jays.
Yeah, we're not really left with anything else to do other than hope. Like Ross Atkins is going to be the manager this offseason. He's going to be the one in charge of making the moves. So we're forced to put our trust in Ross Atkins to make this team better. He has said in pretty much every single answer he gave that the goal is to make the team better, which obviously you want to hear from your manager, but that should, again, like I said before, should be the goal of every single team and every single manager. So it's unfortunately just, again, a wait and see game. Winter meetings are coming up though, and that is usually around the time where these big signings do happen. So we'll be able to talk a lot more and give a lot more certainty in the next couple of weeks with where players go, where the signings happen, who the Toronto Blue Jays end up getting this offseason. But as we get further and further into this offseason, he was referencing Shohei Ohtani and getting asked about Shohei Ohtani a fair amount. And as we've seen through history, what did we see last season? What have we seen the season before? Toronto Blue Jays are in on all these free agents, on all these big names, and then not a lot happened. So hopefully we don't get that again. But when you've had 8-9 years of Ross Atkins and company, and you've seen how these off seasons go, it is tough to be confident about a competitive team in 2025 in Toronto Blue Jays land.
Yeah. Yep. Like I said, be wary. Watch again. There might be some Juan Soto information coming out this weekend. So make sure you guys are tuned in here. Make sure you got the bell notification on. Either way, I mean, if the Blue Jays land, then we'll be live. We'll be live. You guys make sure you tune in.
I think no matter what, wherever Juan Soto goes,
yeah.
even if he goes anywhere, we'll probably just go live and give our thoughts on the situation, the heartbreak, and just what we're doing to try to stay mentally strong after back-to-back years of going through a free agency and not getting the biggest free agent. And we might actually get a three-peat of that if they cannot sign Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and that might be the worst heartbreak of all time. So, again, we'll try to end it off on a more positive note. Nobody has signed yet, or none of the bigger free agents have signed. So, technically, everyone is available. We just need Ross Atkins to kind of just pull the trigger and actually get some of these big free agents to sign with the Toronto Blue Jays.
Yeah. We'll have to wait and see. Again, it's going to be an interesting. This was my prediction, right? Saturday, December 7th, Juan Soto signs. So, we'll see. We'll see if I'm like the MLB predictions genius or not. And if it does happen, like Carter said, we will be live either way. Hopefully, we're popping champagne on the live stream. But, I don't know. Don't get your hopes too high. But, keep in the loop. Keep know what's going on. Keep tuning in to us. We'll keep you guys well informed. As always, thanks for watching, tuning in. We'll see you guys on, hopefully Saturday. But other than that, Monday.